Good afternoon, class. As I prepare to put the finishing touches on this week, I want to leave you with several minutes to round out the comments that we made in class today. Today's was largely a lecture, and I wish there had been more time for comments and questions and observations, because I do think this is really interesting material, and as I can tell from talking with you, a lot of you have a really impressive level of understanding, and I think it's pretty cool to pair the history with our sort of understanding of Scripture that we have. As I mentioned, I'll repeat, for me, learning the historical context alongside some of the books and the sacred texts of the Bible is, I think, a pretty fascinating pairing. So we left off today, I was introducing you to the Phoenicians, and we'll be learning more about the Phoenicians. But the Phoenicians are important to understand and appreciate because we'll see them as major movers and shakers within the region of the Mediterranean. It's also worth noting that they are a really significant neighbor of the short-lived empire, Hebrew Empire, the founding of really Israel in its first expression. So we were talking about the brief, really three-part experiment whereby the Hebrew people took on a king, and as you know, this was a somewhat controversial decision that the original covenant that was established between Abraham and Elohim did not call for kings. In fact, kings seem to be somewhat counter to the sacred relationship and the relationship with the God of this monotheistic people. And so when Saul becomes the first king, when he assumes the throne in the late 11th century BCE, there is quite a bit of controversy and doubt and questioning that goes along with that. Samuel, who is one of the judges, we talked about the judges and the roles that they played during the period of the wanderings and essentially most of what is discussed in Exodus. Samuel cautions against the formation of kings. Saul is sort of viewed as responsible for the breaking or modifying of the covenant that had existed with the Hebrew people and Elohim throughout the 1,000 years or so of their existence. And so things do not go well. Saul's reign is going to be very short-lived. In fact, Saul, almost from the very beginning of his rule, has reason to fear his successor. David has already kind of been dubbed as the heir apparent. Saul becomes jealous, concerned. Saul is not particularly well liked. He even tries to have David put to death. David escapes, survives, so on and so forth. Ultimately, Saul's demise will be he will actually kill himself. And so David emerges and claims the throne of the Hebrew people, and his tenure is also somewhat controversial, but far better, I would say, than that of Saul. David, after all, does lead the Hebrews up against some of their powerful neighbors. Probably the most noteworthy is the Philistines. They experience military success. This allows them to establish more of a landed empire. And again, we're right over here on this edge is where the Hebrews will establish their claim to the land of Canaan. Now, Solomon will succeed David. The controversy, I should say, surrounding David is that he does have his fair share of sort of ethical struggles as well. And as one reads in the Old Testament, you hear of David's falling in love with Bathsheba and his essentially having her husband put to death, at least indirectly, by having him serve in a battle where his death is more or less assured. Some refer to this even as murder, and the blood of Bathsheba's husband is on David's hands. So he's not a perfect person by any means, but he's a more or less effective leader. He sets the stage for Solomon, and this will be the great, you could call this the golden age of the Hebrew people, because here they build their temple, They establish a physical presence. Solomon in the Old Testament is lauded and cheered as a very wise and very effective leader, although historians, non-biblical historians, find some concerns in the reign of Solomon, particularly his practice of selling and trading away valuable possessions of the Hebrew people in an effort to fund the building projects of his tenure. And so he will be responsible for building the great temple, which you can go see a very small part of, or I shouldn't say small part, you can see the Temple Mount to this day if you visit Jerusalem. However, it's probably testament the fact that after Solomon, not only does the empire not last after Solomon, but when Solomon's son is placed in power to succeed him, large portions of the kingdom, of the empire, will bolt and leave. So 10 of the tribes are going to essentially depart from the short-lived Hebrew Empire under Saul, David, and Solomon. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. We've briefly discussed the period known as the monarchy, but now let's talk about the divided kingdom. So as I mentioned, all is not well following this brief experiment in the Hebrew Empire. What will happen is essentially the empire will split into two pieces. There will be a northern, the 10 of the tribes will leave, and they will take root at their established capital at Samaria, and then the tribe of Judah will maintain its presence in Jerusalem. So we have essentially two Hebrew kingdoms that will essentially form out of protest and out of disagreement over what is proper and what should be the future of these Hebrew people. Then we have a long line of what we could probably call lamentable developments. And of course the book of Lamentations is a story of, it's essentially poetry highlighting the hardship and misfortune of the Hebrew people. And this starts, or I should say it really picks up in 722 when the northern kingdom of the Hebrews, the one based in Samaria, is invaded by the Assyrians. You've heard mention of the Assyrians as a Mesopotamian civilization that comes along a little bit later in the overall development of Mesopotamia. The Assyrians capture Samaria and essentially extinguish the Hebrew people who have settled at Samaria. The way they do this is not through killing and destruction, but they take these people and they effectively scatter them throughout the Assyrian Empire. And what this means is these people are so broken up and so broadcast and sent in so many directions that their culture effectively dies along with their scattering. We call this a diaspora. They are so thinly spread that there's really nothing left. The Hebrews at Jerusalem, the tribe of Judah, are going to linger on. They aren't directly attacked by the Assyrians, and they actually work out some arrangements whereby they pay the powerful Assyrians and buy essentially peace for a brief period of time. Ultimately, the Chaldeans will come in and defeat the Assyrians, and now there is a new group of people that are in charge of the region, and this is going to spell further disaster now for the people of the tribe of Judah based at Jerusalem. So in the beginning of the 6th century BCE, we have this period referred to as the Babylonian Captivity, and this is what the book of Ezra is discussing, the text that I had you read for class today. And in the Babylonian Captivity, essentially what happens is most of the people who live at Jerusalem, the Hebrews, are left alone. But the aristocrats, the most powerful, the most learned, the most wealthy of the Hebrew people are going to be taken into exile in Babylon. So they're removed to the capital of the Chaldean empire. Now, that is tough, and this is a period where the a number of Hebrew prophets will step forward, among them Isaiah, and they will write and essentially interpret what this means. Essentially, it's that the Hebrew people have lost their way. They broke their covenant with Elohim, or now they would refer to him as Yahweh. They broke their covenant with Yahweh, and therefore they are experiencing tremendous hardship. This is all part of what the people deserve. It's part of Yahweh's plan to help to chasten and teach a valuable lesson to these people. So as a result of this, there's going to be some changes and difficulties. And so out of that, we get a very important and valuable period in the history of the ancient Hebrews. Now we can refer to these as the people of Israel. Okay? So in this process of captivity, a very important development happens. The Persians come along. The Persians are going to be a new and defining force in the world of the Middle East. They will topple the Chaldeans, and this is great news, really, because surprisingly, King Cyrus, the Persian king, is going to become a very strong advocate of the people of Israel. In fact, he's going to return the elite members of Israeli society back to Jerusalem, and he's going to help fund and support these people in rebuilding their temple. Their temple was destroyed when the Chaldeans overtook Jerusalem at the beginning of the 6th century BCE. Now, why does he do this? Cyrus was not a monotheist, or at least he was not monotheistic in the tradition of the ancient Hebrews, but he was a Zoroastrian. And as your textbook talks a little bit about the Zoroastrians really saw the world in dualistic terms. They saw it as a fight between good and evil. And fortunately for the Hebrews, or the people of Israel, Cyrus believed that the God Yahweh and the monotheistic tradition of the Hebrew people was on the side of good. And so he sides with them, he upholds them and supports them, and this is a very fortunate development in the history of the Hebrew people. And so when we read the prophets of the Old Testament who are mourning and dispirited and sad, in many respects, Cyrus is going to become yet again another opportunity for them to perhaps make a different move and change themselves and become, once again, be keeping with the desires of Yahweh. So, monotheistic, here we have just our sort of spiritual dimensions. Yahweh is powerful, to be feared and respected, just and good. You take care of, when you follow him and keep the covenant, things go well. When you don't, they go poorly. Okay? And also, Yahweh is very closely engaged and closely monitoring of the world that he has created for his Hebrew people. And of course, the covenant, the law, and the prophets are all critical pieces of that. So with that, I will stop, and I will look forward to seeing you on Monday. Have a great weekend.